The Elvereth colony didn't fall with a bang, but with a wheezing electrical sigh, like the galaxy had grown tired of pretending things were going well. The last transmission was a confused squawk from the agricultural AI complaining about unethical pruning, and then a long drawn-out beep. After that, silence, the kind that feels personal. The planet's atmosphere had the damp, sticky personality of a used sock, and the magnetic dust stuck to everything, especially lungs. Sergeant Elias Rourke tripped over a vine-wrapped traffic cone on his approach and swore loudly enough to trigger his translator's profanity filter. "Language inappropriate for diplomatic engagement," it chirped politely. "Diplomatic?" Rourke muttered, brushing gravel off his faceplate. "I'm the only person here, and I just cursed at a traffic cone." He limped into the ruin with one functioning leg brace, a busted plasma sidearm, and a backpack full of military-issue nutrient paste packets with cheerful names like Choco Squid and Citrus Beef. The place looked like a city designed by sad poets and then punched by a meteor. Broken towers jutted up like snapped fingers, and shattered panels crunched underfoot with every step. Occasionally, a holographic billboard flickered to life to offer unlimited oxygen, now 17% less toxic, then fizzled again. The movement registered at the corner of his HUD just as he was unsealing a ration. Tiny, fast, skittering. Rourke stilled, shifted, listened. Nothing. He resumed tearing open the packet with his teeth because the gloves were too clumsy. The protein bar looked like despair in solid form. He was about to take a bite when something squeaked behind a half-collapsed air vent. Then another squeak. Then 3 more. "Oh, great," he mumbled. "Space rats. Intergalactic pizza thieves." He turned toward the vent, cautious, slow. His boots left moon-shaped impressions in the dust. The silence returned, but sharper now, like it was watching. Rourke crouched near the vent and set the protein bar on the ground. Then he stood back, raised his hands, and said loudly, "I come in peace." Also hunger, but mostly peace. From the shadows of the vent, a pair of large violet eyes blinked. Then another. Then 5 more. Long, delicate ears uncurled like antennae, twitching at every sound. The alien girls didn't speak, didn't move, just trembled like leaves before a storm. "Hey," Rourke said gently, "you're not rats." "Brilliant deduction, soldier." One of the girls took a timid step forward. Her feet were bare and covered in some sort of glowing pollen. She wore a ragged cloak that looked like it used to be part of a decorative banner. Her hair was silver pink, floating slightly as if caught in a soft gravity ripple. She stared at the protein bar with all the suspicion of someone who'd seen what happened after eating one. "It's edible," Rourke said. "Mostly. I've eaten 6 and only hallucinated twice." Another girl peeked out and whispered something in a language his translator couldn't parse. The tone was halfway between, "Are we about to die?" and "Is that your real face?" The first girl tiptoed closer, bent down, and grabbed the bar so quickly she startled herself and dropped it again. She stared at it accusingly. "Yeah," Rourke said, "they do that to morale." After a moment of conferring in squeaky alien murmurs, they picked up the bar again. One girl sniffed it. Another tapped it like it might explode. Eventually, they nibbled, and to his surprise, they didn't immediately spit it out or explode. The one with the banner cloak stepped forward, fidgeted with the hem, and tried to mimic a salute. It looked more like jazz hands, but the effort was there. "I'm Rourke," he said. "Elias, human, allegedly a soldier, though at this point I might just be a wandering granola bar vendor." Her head tilted, her ears wiggled. "Rook?" she said cautiously. "That's close enough." She repeated it again, more confidently. "Rook. Rook." "Sure, why not? I've been called worse." The others gathered behind her now, emerging from the rubble like pastel ghosts. They were all small, long-limbed, delicate, each with those distinct ears and floating hair. None of them looked older than 10, whatever 10 looked like on an alien calendar. Rourke pulled out another bar and placed it on the ground. Then a third. Then with a sigh, the last 2. "Dinner's served," he muttered. "And by dinner I mean disappointment compressed into chewable rectangles." One of the girls, the tiniest, barely up to his knee, held up a small crystal with flickering light inside. She pointed at it, then at him, then mimed a question with her hands. Is that your version of a phone? Translator? Soul fragment? She squinted, tapped the crystal, and a tiny holographic image appeared, a drawing of a tall, armored human with red eyes and flames shooting from his mouth. Then the image of a crying alien girl, then the same armored human stomping on flowers. Rourke stared. Wow, PR's really gone downhill. The girl looked at him again, back at the image, then at him. Slowly, she raised an eyebrow. He raised both of his. Yeah, okay, I can see the resemblance. But in fairness, I haven't stomped a flower in at least a week. They didn't laugh, but one of them made a chirping noise that might have been the equivalent, or indigestion. He decided to test something. He took off his helmet, instant terror. 3 of them screamed and vanished behind a chunk of wall. The others stared at him, frozen. Okay, yeah, Rourke said. That was a mistake. He waited. Slowly, one by one, they peeked out. The banner cloak girl stepped forward again, touched his cheek gently, and made a noise like a surprised frog. Yeah, he said. Not a lizard, not a robot, just a tired guy with 5 rations and 1 functioning knee. You win the apocalypse lottery. She turned and barked something at the others. It translated to, he is squishy. Great. Squishy. The sun, or whatever passed for it, was setting now. Rourke unpacked a thermal blanket, threw it over a half-crushed table, and sat beneath it. After a pause, the girls huddled nearby, not touching him, not speaking, but close enough to share the heat. He looked at them. So what now? They stared back. The smallest one held up another crystal. This one showed a question mark, followed by an icon of a person, then a heart, then a planet, then an explosion, then another question mark. Rourke leaned back against the pipe. Yeah, kid, same question. He closed his eyes and sighed. Something chirped. A warm shape curled up next to him. Then another. By nightfall, he was covered in tiny aliens. And somehow, despite the ache in his bones and the static in his brain, Rourke slept better than he had in months. Rourke woke to something cold and slimy being pressed against his forehead. For a terrifying moment, he thought he was under attack by a rogue swamp creature. Then he blinked and saw the youngest alien girl, Tila, he'd decided, smiling proudly while holding what appeared to be half a bioluminescent cucumber. Thanks, he mumbled. She chirped and gestured to eat it. Rourke stared at the thing. It was dripping slightly and humming. I'm flattered, he said, but where I come from, breakfast doesn't usually glow unless something has gone very, very wrong. Tila continued to smile in that way children do, when they're absolutely certain they've done something excellent. Not wanting to cause a diplomatic incident before brushing his teeth, Rourke took a very small bite. It tasted like lemon, static electricity, and regret. He smiled weakly. Delicious. Please tell me it's not sentient. Another girl, Zelda, he was pretty sure, waved a stick around like a baton. It had a bit of salvage tech tied to the end, blinking softly. She mimicked Rourke's helmeted salute, though her version included some kind of interpretive dance. Ah, Rourke said, we've entered the ritual reenactment phase of trauma bonding. Great. I skipped this day in training. They gathered around him as he pulled out his cracked data pad, its screen spiderwebbed but still functional. A 12% battery warning blinked at him with increasing judgment. He'd rigged a translator patch to the pad last night, and now it was picking up fragments from their alien dialect, some kind of melodic tongue that relied on inflection, ear movement, and the occasional body wiggle. It was like trying to interpret opera sung by caffeinated dolphins. Still, it was progress. Okay, team, Rourke said, using the tone of someone who's never actually led a team and suspects everyone knows it. Today we do recon. Find out what's still working in this place. Communications array, water purification, maybe a vending machine that doesn't bite. Zelda and Tila nodded solemnly. One of the older girls, Rourke hadn't named her yet but was considering Sergeant Sass, folded her arms and pointed to the sky, miming explosions. Yeah, I know. The whole humans bombed our planet thing. Not great press, but I'm trying to help now. Think of me as a very clumsy apology wrapped in body armor. She didn't smile, But she didn't throw a rock either. That was something. They scouted the remains of the main tower. Rourke moved slowly, letting the girls flit ahead like glittery moths with ears. The tower's interior had collapsed into itself like a sulking child. He found a partially functional control console buried under what used to be a ceiling and now resembled modern art. It sparked when he touched it. "I miss chairs," he muttered, "and plumbing, and coffee that doesn't have a face." He patched into the local network. The results were confusing. The colony's distress beacon had been shut off manually 3 days before the last human unit withdrew. Power levels were inconsistent, like someone had been rerouting energy into the ventilation systems. Oddest of all, there were encrypted logs from something called Protocol 7, empathy containment. "Oh, great," Rourke said. "Nothing says Happy Sci-Fi Day like ominous military protocols and a file labeled, 'Do not open under any circumstances.'" He opened it. A stream of data spilled across the screen, followed by a grainy video. It showed a lab. Children, long-eared like the girls, hooked up to glowing wires. A human scientist droning on about empathic field density fluctuations, while a child wept in the corner. Rourke exhaled. "I really hate being the good guy after the bad guys wore the same uniform." The console sparked again and died. He stared at the dead screen, lips pressed into a line. The girls watched him. Tila tugged on his glove. He forced a smile. "Okay, let's go find something that doesn't involve tears and dystopia, like lunch." They returned to their makeshift camp under the collapsed sky bridge. Rourke unpacked his final few rations, this time without the labels. The mystery added a touch of excitement. One was green and jiggled. One was brown and suspiciously fuzzy. The last one tried to move on its own. "I'm going to pretend this is cultural cuisine," he said, "and not a galactic HR violation." The girls laughed. It was a new sound. Light, overlapping, almost like water bubbling over pebbles. He let it soak into him. For a moment, the wreckage didn't feel quite so heavy. That night, under the flickering tarp, Rourke insisted was the luxury model. They told stories. Or rather, they acted them out, using small pieces of scrap and exaggerated gestures. One girl mimed a giant robot getting stuck in a doorway. Another portrayed an evil human general who sneezed fire and fell into a trash compactor. Rourke, not to be outdone, performed his impression of a malfunctioning sanitation drone trying to flirt with a generator. They were halfway through improvising a musical number about exploding snacks when a perimeter alert pinged. Rourke froze. The girls fell silent. He tapped the sensor drone, jury-rigged from a broken cleaner bot and one of Tila's toys. The readout showed movement. Not animals, not wind, boots, multiple pairs, coming from the ridge to the west. His hand moved instinctively to his weapon, then paused. The girls were watching, hearts in their eyes, trust on their faces. He lowered the rifle. "Okay," he whispered, "showtime." He pulled the thermal blanket over their little shelter, switched off all lights, and activated the anti-heat signature scrambler, a piece of tech the girls had been using as a teapot. They crouched in silence, breathless. The footsteps came closer, muffled voices distorted by the wind, human voices, but not friendly ones. Someone cursed about unfinished business and xenospecimens. Another grumbled about salvage priorities. Then the clanking of metal on metal as someone kicked a supply crate. Then, retreating. Rourke didn't move for a full minute. Then, slowly, he exhaled. The girls unfroze. One by one, they leaned against him, or curled into his lap, or simply rested their heads on his boots. Tila handed him the glowing cucumber again. This time, he took a bigger bite. Still tasted like regret, but also, maybe, like the beginning of something worth protecting. The next morning, Rourke woke to someone brushing his eyebrows with what turned out to be a feather from a sentient bird species native to Sector 12F. The bird in question had not consented to this and was pecking aggressively at the nearest structural beam. Tila, holding the feather like a magic wand, blinked innocently. "Rook fancy now," she chirped. "Terrific," Rourke muttered. "I've always dreamed of becoming an eyebrow god." He sat up slowly, his joints complaining like old furniture. Around him, the girls were assembling what looked suspiciously like a throne made of broken drone parts and scrap foam. The banner cloak girl, now fully committed to her new role as second-in-command, had apparently decided he needed to begin formal leadership rituals. "I didn't sign up for monarchy," he said. "I'm more of a disgruntled middle manager with occasional hero aspirations." Zelda handed him a crown made of noodles. "Well," he said, putting it on, "when in space..." He activated the day's scan sweep with his elbow while balancing the noodle crown, which immediately began to sag. The drone he'd cobbled together, the one nicknamed Snitchy, buzzed into view, its patched lenses twitching. "Let's see what fresh horror awaits us today," Rourke muttered. Snitchy displayed its findings in holographic bursts. There was movement in the south quadrant. Not hostile, not entirely friendly either. The figures were humanoid, but one of them had what appeared to be a vacuum tube for an arm, and another one kept bouncing in place like a child's toy possessed by caffeine demons. "Oh no," Rourke groaned. "Scaver cultists," Zelda chirped inquisitively. "They worship malfunctioning appliances," he explained. "Think toaster gods, blender rites, and the holy ritual of vacuum suction. Last time I ran into them, they tried to recruit my boots." The girls looked alarmed. "Don't worry," Rourke said, checking his charge pack. "We've got time. They're slow, probably arguing theology with a broken coffee machine." They fortified the shelter using bent solar panels, 3 melted hoverboards, and what might have once been part of a playground slide. The girls took it seriously, assigning each other roles. Tila became noise monitor and began assigning penalties for every loud footstep, which mostly involved being tickled by antennae. Rourke took watch duty from atop a tilted supply crate labeled "Emergency Spaghetti Rations, Do Not Question." From his perch, he reviewed the console logs he'd salvaged. The phrase "empathy containment" haunted him. The girls weren't weapons. They weren't threats. They were somehow sensitive to emotional fields. Not just responsive, but amplifying. Their fear could trigger others' aggression. Their joy could short-circuit surveillance drones. Tila once laughed so hard a hover turret forgot how to fire. He flipped through the files, noting that the program had been canceled after a test subject caused a regional ceasefire just by crying near the command table. No wonder the higher-ups wanted them gone. You couldn't weaponize peace. Footsteps below interrupted his thoughts. Zelda handed him a piece of metal with strange glyphs etched into it. "A charm," she said, "for courage." It looked suspiciously like a broken data drive, but he pocketed it anyway. Then the alarms blinked. The scavers were closer than expected. He activated perimeter defenses, mostly for show. Light beams, humming noisemakers, and one very judgmental AI he'd repurposed from a parenting tutorial archive. It now issued unhelpful statements like, "Have you tried using your words?" and "Tantrums won't solve interstellar conflict." The scavers crept to the edge of the ruins. Rourke could see their outlines now. Patchwork armor, gleaming lenses, and the unmistakable aura of people who had strong opinions about toaster rights. Their leader stepped forward, raised a gleaming can opener staff, and intoned, "Halt, meat being! We have sensed vibrations of unclaimed innocence in this zone." "I think that means they found the kids," Rourke whispered. He stepped forward, armor clanking. "This zone is under human jurisdiction. Authorized personnel only." The scaver leader squinted. "You are a human?" "I am a Rourke," he said firmly, "and these kids are under Rourke law." The scavers conferred. One of them asked if Rourke law involved toaster sacrifice. Another asked if empathy could be bartered for noodles. "No," and Rourke hesitated. "Wait, what kind of noodles?" There was a tense pause. Then from behind him, Tila emerged holding a potato launcher, constructed from vacuum tubing and stubborn optimism. She squinted, took aim, and fired. A single glowing root vegetable flew through the air and hit a scaver in the knee. He yelped, "I was an appliance once." The scavers fled. Rourke turned to Tila, jaw hanging open. She handed him another glowing potato. "Snack bomb," she said, smiling like a tiny chaos deity. Back at camp, the celebration was immediate and chaotic. The girls reenacted the battle with interpretive dance and several overcooked spaghetti noodles used as nunchucks. Zelda tried to knight Tila using a soup ladle. Sergeant Sass rolled her eyes so hard it might have counted as an orbit. Rourke sat back watching them. He tapped a message into his still barely alive datapad. Subject: unauthorized companions. Priority: reclassification request. Reason: not threats, not liabilities, not anomalies. They're just kids. He hesitated. Also, if you send anyone else, send snacks, preferably non-glowing. He hit send and looked up just as someone handed him a bowl of bioluminescent stew. It pulsed slightly. He sighed. Bottoms up. Rourke awoke upside down, which was concerning since he distinctly remembered going to sleep right side up. It took a moment to realize Tila had strapped him to a makeshift hammock using decommissioned safety belts and half a curtain. She stood nearby, proudly holding a clipboard fashioned from a cracked tablet. Today is fun protocol, she announced. You are late for dream debriefing. I wasn't aware I signed up for that, he groaned, trying not to slide onto his head. Can I request a refund or at least a coffee? She tapped the tablet. Request denied. Dream involves screaming sandwiches and marriage to a mop. That tracks. The rest of the girls were already in action. Someone had organized a talent show using flashlights, hologram distorters, and a chair that sometimes bit people. Sergeant Sass, the most serious of the group, was attempting to juggle radioactive stones with practiced scorn. Zelda wore a cardboard crown and was narrating everyone's act in a dramatic voice that added at least 3 unnecessary explosions per minute. 10 out of 10, she declared after each performance, would watch again, especially if lasers were involved. Rourke sat back down with what dignity he could recover and checked the latest drone readings. There were no scaver signals, no proximity alarms, and, miraculously, no rogue vending machines on the warpath. A lull, a real one. He almost didn't trust it. Instead of running drills or double-checking perimeters, he decided to implement mandatory chill hour, which he invented on the spot. He pulled out the last intact piece of tech he had salvaged, a damaged VR projection cube that still functioned at about 40% and ran mostly outdated Earth simulations. Okay, who wants to see a beach? He asked, holding up the cube. Blank stares. It's a location where humans used to sit in the sun and slowly roast like decorative meats. Sand, water, weird games involving inflatable fruit. Tila raised her hand. Is beach dangerous? Only emotionally. He activated the cube. The simulation flickered, grainy but coherent. Palms waved. A seagull screamed in digital defiance. The water shimmered slightly wrong, but close enough. The girls gasped. They walked barefoot through the light, laughing, occasionally trying to bite the ocean. Zelda declared the sun her nemesis and built a fortress out of projected beach chairs. Sass solemnly buried a VR crab as if honoring a fallen soldier. Rourke sat in the fake sand and leaned back on his elbows. For a while there was no war, no files marked containment, no whispering command channels. Then the cube glitched. A ripple passed through the projection, and for a second, a military emblem appeared, one he hadn't seen before, the symbol of the Arbitrax Enforcement Initiative, a black spiral inside a red triangle. Then it was gone. He froze. He tapped the cube, checked its memory cache. A corrupted program, hidden, recently installed. It wasn't just projecting simulations. It was broadcasting. Someone knew he was here. His datapad vibrated softly. A message flashed on the cracked screen. Unregistered emotive zone detected. Containment incoming. Prepare for collection. ETA, 72 hours. Rourke stared at it. Of course, he muttered, just when we find a working beach. He didn't tell the girls immediately. Instead, he quietly ran diagnostics, checked exits, evaluated the rover they'd half buried last week when Tila declared it a space turtle. The engine worked, mostly. The navigation system spoke only in Latin and had opinions about the moon. They could escape, maybe, but not without leaving something behind. That night he sat with Tila while she reprogrammed a cleaning drone to sing lullabies. She paused mid-wire and looked at him. You look like fear, she said. I feel like indigestion. She tilted her head. Are bad ones coming? He hesitated. Maybe, but not today. She nodded, satisfied. Then today is still good. He tucked the blanket around her. You're a weird little genius, you know that? I contain multitudes. Okay, Walt Whitman. She immediately demanded to be called Commander Multitude for the rest of the evening. Zelda insisted on throwing a pre-not apocalypse party. There were root vegetable skewers, glowing fruit punch, and a game called Guess Who's Not an Infiltrator, which Rourke kept losing despite not being an infiltrator. Someone fashioned a disco orb out of scrap metal and trauma. It was glorious. But underneath it, he prepared. He packed rations, checked oxygen filters, fixed the rover's latrine module, a thankless job, programmed decoys, recorded a message to command with just enough sarcasm to trigger bureaucratic delay. He couldn't stop Arbitrax from arriving, but he could make sure they'd have to earn every meter. The next morning, the beach cube shorted out completely. Zelda gave it a ceremonial burial next to the crab. Rourke saluted. Then he stood, armor creaking, voice steady. Okay, kids, time to move. The rover refused to start on the first try. Of course, Rourke muttered, kicking the wheel like it owed him money. Nothing says heroic escape like percussive maintenance. Zelda crouched beside the engine and thumped it with a wrench twice her size. The dashboard flickered to life with a long electronic groan that sounded suspiciously like it had just woken up from a nap it deeply resented. Rover is grumpy, Tila reported, but compliant. Same, Rourke said. Let's go. They left the ruins in a slow, bumpy crawl, wrapped in heat camouflage tarps and trailing behind a decoy beacon, broadcasting a loop of static and cheerful propaganda jingles. The plan was simple. Head toward the old mining tunnels in the western cliffs, reactivate the subspace transmitter buried there, and send an encrypted signal to the Interstellar Ethics Tribunal, a long shot, but the only authority with the guts and paperwork to override Arbitrax's containment order. Also, the tribunal owed Rourke a favor involving a diplomatic party, a stolen hover pig, and 17 allergic ambassadors. Long story. The terrain grew jagged. Tila named each rock they passed. That one's Kevin. That's Angry Kevin. That's Kevin too. That one we don't talk about. Zelda tried to take over driving until the rover lurched sideways and declared her legally divorced from the steering wheel. They reached the tunnels by dusk. The entrance was sealed, half buried in ash and forgotten promises. Rourke and Sergeant Sass pried it open with a crowbar, some curses, and one of Tila's explosive potatoes. Inside, the walls pulsed faintly with residual energy. Rourke followed the old markings to a command node, kicked aside a petrified sandwich, and plugged in the transmitter. Static. Then a flicker. Then a voice. Welcome, user. Please input credentials or dance for access. Rourke cracked his knuckles. Let's negotiate. It took 37 minutes, a limerick about bureaucratic inefficiency, and an improvised rap battle against the AI's firewall, but he got through. He sent the message. Coordinates, situation, evidence logs, and a heartfelt note that read, I swear if you ignore this, I will haunt your filing systems forever. Confirmation blinked. Message received. Tribunal response ETA. 18 hours. The girls cheered. Then the alarm blared. Arbitrax forces had arrived early. They swarmed the ruins behind them. Black ships, chrome armor, sterile voices demanding compliance. Drones zipped through the sky like judgmental mosquitoes. A cold voice rang out across the canyon. You are harboring uncontained empathic anomalies. Surrender or be neutralized. Rourke stood at the tunnel entrance, gun at his side, noodle crown slightly askew. Surrender this, he said, and hit the decoy trigger. A hologram of him sprinted in the opposite direction, screaming, I regret nothing, at full volume. Half the drones chased it immediately. Idiots, Rourke muttered fondly. They fell back deeper into the tunnels, switching paths at every fork, laying down reflective nets and fake heat signatures. The girls moved like they'd been trained for it, because they had, by him, through games and chaos and scaver ambush drills disguised as birthday parties. But eventually, the Arbitrax units found them. They cornered the group in a central chamber. The girls stood behind Rourke, who raised his rifle and whispered, If you try to hurt them, you're going to find out exactly how many rules I'm willing to break. An officer stepped forward, faceless behind a polished visor. Your compassion has compromised your judgment, Sergeant. Maybe, Rourke said. But their laughter fixed it. Tila stepped beside him, then Zelda, then all of them, glowing faintly. Their empathy fields hummed. Arbitrac's own sensors flickered. The nearest officer twitched. "They're connecting," someone muttered. "I'm remembering my mother. Why am I—" He sat down, took off his helmet. One by one, the field spread. The emotion was overwhelming. Fear, hope, loss, joy, absurdity, all wrapped together in glowing strands only the girls could weave. Rourke dropped his rifle. He didn't need it anymore. When the tribunal ship landed, 23 minutes later, it found Arbitrac's agents either crying, hugging, or attempting to file paperwork for a spontaneous moral epiphany. The ethics representative stepped down, read the report, and sighed. Not again. Later, as Rourke filled out 17 contradictory custody forms and tried to convince Tila not to rewrite the law books in crayon, a small screen blinked. Status: containment order rescinded. Status: children transferred to civilian guardianship. Status: Guardian E. Rourke. He looked up. Wait, I'm what? Zelda placed a homemade medal around his neck. It said #1 Space Dad. Tila saluted with a wrench. Sergeant Sass rolled her eyes and handed him a clipboard labeled Rules for Being in Charge, also snacks. He looked around at his chaotic, long-eared crew and sat down heavily on a crate that was probably still radioactive. "Okay," he said, "but bedtime is now legally enforceable." They cheered. He grinned. "And tomorrow, we teach the tribunal how to play interstellar tag. You know, for diplomacy. Because sometimes the galaxy didn't need more soldiers. It just needed someone willing to kneel down in the rubble and offer a snack."